Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. I'm Andy Green, and with me,
Felix Schultz.
Reporting for duty.
Yeah, I thought I might do that. Show up to the virtual office, finally.
Turn up to work. Not that we can talk, we're still dining off your, recent trip to Geneva.
Mate, I joked about it recently, but for reals,
Paying our bills.
we're going to be, this is content. It's going to be, 2024. We're still going to be rolling out 2023 content. That's how it's.
I don't
how
know
we
that
roll.
you spoke to that many people, but I know you caught up with a whole bunch of interesting friends and family in the watch community. Who have you pinched for a chat for this week?
Well, yeah, this is one of those sort of. We had plans early on to. I chatted to you about, we'll try and run into people and, just pull out the mic. I think we all suspected that those casual interviews weren't necessarily going to happen quite as we imagined in our heads, because it's kind of weird to just pull out microphones and start recording people, and B, everyone's super busy. But
There is that.
I did have a convenient semi-casual catch up. I did also.
What you do in your personal time is your business.
Chat him up. Tony Traina and Mark Kauzlarich from Hodinkee. I ran into them serendipitously at the front of Cartier, the mothership, and they had 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes. We pulled out the old microphones. We had a little bit of a chat. I can't recall. I think we chatted about disappointments. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Or maybe surprises or disappointments. We all kept it PC.
That hopefully no children come up.
No, and there's going to be some organic background noise, I suspect, in that. So when we get ready for the interview, maybe turn off.
I think you mean some highly engineered soundscaping to really capture the atmosphere of the fair.
Well, I mean, this is just a lot. This is a pretty quiet room in the background here compared to 15 people trying to order free champagne behind me. It's a slightly different vibe.
The buzz, again, it's that atmosphere, it's that money can't buy experience that, we bring to you.
As a previous audio producer is referred to as an Atmos track.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just have it across everything we record.
I didn't actually hate it, sort of hearing that background noise. I know we chatted to Nick from TAG Heuer a couple of times, and I don't hate it. I think it's a nice sort of vibe because, podcasts can get a little bit clinical.
You say that now. Nick was a pretty quiet environment, I think. This might be something else. You might have to mess with those levels.
Oh, great. I'm looking forward to editing it up. But speaking of Nicholas's, Felix.
Yes.
We have a couple of favourite Nicholas's. Obviously, Babichuk from TAG Heuer. But who's number two?
This week's sponsor, by the way.
Thank you.
TAG Heuer, tagheuer.com. Go visit them. Nicholas Kenyon, another excellent Nicholas. Perhaps the best of the Nicholases, or maybe not, is Nicolas Cage. I think he deserves his own mini segment because I watched a video of him with, I think, Stephen Colbert on his 5 favourite movies, which was an interesting, and he's such an interesting guy, and it really reminded me of... I've been watching rewatching Community recently, and there's sort of there's an on-running reference in there to Nicolas Cage. Is he good or bad? What do you think?
I think he's amazing. I think sometimes he just needs a bit of cash, but I think I have a general rule, whereas if Nicolas Cage is in the film, I'm going to watch it, good, bad, or ugly, and I don't ever really regret it, because if he does horrible really well, obviously. Yes. What did he do with Pedro, the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent?
Massive Talent, yep.
That was an incredible film.
Yep.
Just recently. That was like peak him, I feel.
His favourite, this is one that you referenced and I still haven't watched, his favourite of his own movies is Pig.
Yeah.
I think
it's just a ride.
I think he's kind of like a mix between takes himself super seriously even when it's a trash. Like, he tries to get the best out. He takes every role seriously, and sometimes that's a bad thing, maybe. Like, he doesn't...
I don't think he takes himself that serious. I think he takes his work seriously, but his own personality, I think he's just owns it.
Yeah, I think he's wonderful. I don't love everything he's in, but they're always entertaining and great. Also, I think he's possibly one of the most interesting watch collectors.
Why is that?
Out there. He's just, he's got great watches. Like the fact that old mate Francis Ford Coppola's doing that, had that piece unique with bloody Jean, Nicolas Cage is involved in that or has his, the level of literacy and what he had early on, like even that leopard print Daytona.
Ahead of the pack.
Ahead of the pack. He has that, what is it, the Rolex calendar, the 50s one with the stars on it. I don't know. He's got a very interesting and serious watch collection that I think if someone out there, of the watch world has the access, maybe Tony Traina, he could reach out to old Nicolas Cage.
Line it up. I don't think Nicolas Cage would do it. I think that's not Nicolas Cage to talk about his watches.
No.
I just don't think
imagine if you did. Imagine if you did.
Although he did some, I think it was GQ where he did kind of bring up some of his possessions. He talked about that. Didn't he buy like a dinosaur skull that then he had to give back to the government because it was illegally purchased, and it was like a $50 million dinosaur head or something?
Possibly. That seems very on par.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my ruminating on the genius of Nicolas Cage.
Oh, fantastic. Speaking on ruminating genius things, if you'll lay me up for another segue, I got sent a fat parcel.
You're lining yourself up.
I got sent a fat parcel from Glashütte.
Really?
Four watches that
Quartet.
dropped. A quartet, as they call it, that dropped just this week, just days before we released this. And that is, of course, from Nomos. They are the Shades of Pink Tetra pieces that they said, Andy, you like pink? Felix, you like pink? Why don't we send over kind of our 4 takes on pink and get your guys' thoughts? I said, fantastic. They are, obviously, the Tetra is that sort of square dial and square case that they do. A few things that jump out to me. The size is 29.5 millimeters.
It's not a bad size.
Not going to lie, it's small.
Oh, okay. That's a small size, he said knowingly.
It's not too small.
Sure.
It's kind of elegant. Word is that a lot of, it's already been in this size. A lot of, guys are interested in this size. I think it's quite nice. It's obviously that that design perspective works really well. The colours are, they range from like silver with a sort of pink subdial to more of like a pink dial with a silver subdial, and then there's a nude colour and an eggplant colour, which are a little bit suggestive.
Wow.
Aubergine and nude, good combo. If I've ever seen it. Vegan leather straps, which is cool. I always find this with straps, like unless they tell you, you would have no idea. I think when it comes to that sort of suede vegan that everyone does these days.
Yeah, Alcantara or whatever it is.
Super comfortable, sits on the wrist, but I quite like it. I quite like this watch, Felix.
Which of the 4, which would be the one that you accidentally forget to send back to Glashütte?
I think the silver with the pink subdial. It's got a really nice blue seconds hand and then some sort of darker blue markers and numerals. I think that the contrast of the pink against the silver works the best, I got to say. I do like the full pink though, so maybe 4 come this way, only 2 go back.
Sure. I think that's right. I think the ones, I haven't seen them IRL like you. I am really into the one with that pink subdial as well. I think that's a nice contrast and a nice pop, as they say.
And speaking of things that pop, Netflix dropped Beef recently.
Netflix has got beef.
Incredible. I'll have beef with Netflix if they don't drop a season 2. So this is almost like a tale of escalating pettiness and grudges. And it's just incredible. Like, it's one of the first sort of 2 episodes, heads up, are a bit slow and you're kind of like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know if I'm going to go fully into this. But then give it the 3rd episode, you'll be absolutely hooked.
Escalating beef.
Amazing cast.
Ali Wong.
All Asian actors nearly, but it's like a proverb almost. It's just, there are so many lessons, but it's just so good and so stressful. And it's one of those shows where it's like almost, it's not violent. It's a little bit violent, but it's not by any means, I wouldn't say violent.
It's not John Wick.
No, but it gives you that anxiety that you got from like Breaking Bad.
Oof.
Yeah. But it's satisfying. It's satisfying anxiety. Like it's not, the death and the killing and the gore that you kind of got from that show, but it's just that like on edge for 10 hours and you're just kind of like so many curveballs, so unexpected, like a really refreshing concept story, really, really solid. Netflix, check it out. Beef.
Nice. Speaking of really refreshing.
Yeah, tell me.
This is not a good segue, but I'm going to stick with it. after Watches and Wonders, the famous trip
Yes.
of many episodes of content, I visited two manufacturers. I visited Ulysse Nardin and Gerard Perregaux, thanks to the brands and the Hourglass, their Australian distributor, or exclusive retail partner. I'm not sure of the particular wording, but if you want them, that's where you get them. And I thought I would give you a virtual rundown of my couple of days, exploring the world of Ulysse Nardin. What do you know about Ulysse Nardin, Andy? Top liner for me.
I know they're a bit freaky.
Yep. Nice.
They had some strong naval ties.
Mm-hmm.
Been around a long time. Obviously, there's sort of the same management. There was that management buyout a couple of years ago with Gerard Perregaux. So there's a lot of kind of shared work,
So
bit of overlap.
that's pretty good. I mean, that's broadly speaking where I was at with the brand as well. So, and you're right. The shared management thing is really interesting because they're owned along with Gerard Perregaux. They one company, and they have a shared manufacturing facility, which is where I visited first. So it's one building, and they'll produce both brand watches on the same sort of production lines. And it was fascinating. It wasn't the biggest sort of, manufacturer in terms of scale. Like they're a fairly sort of boutique operation, but the quality of what they were doing there and the sort of the access that we got and the transparency was really, really interesting to me. Like we got to sort of have a bit of a look through the development and prototyping.
Yep.
Obviously sort of the machine, sort of the movement, finishing and assembly. That was really interesting. The other thing that I liked and I really appreciated was that they're not pretending to be an all-in-one roof manufacturer. Like they're open about, using a network of suppliers and, using other people. Like, they don't, for example, make the ceramic cases, which is, very specialised, skilled work that they do off-site. So that I find there's always a good degree of trust in there when they talk about, how they're not sort of glossing over those elements. But some things that particularly stood out, I visited a few facilities. This was the first, just the manufacturer. Their high-end sort of assembly and service section where they, if you've bought a, double axis tourbillon or, a Freak, for example, that's probably where it will be looked after. And it was, I believe, one watchmaker looks after it from start to finish, which is kind of cool. And there was another bit that was particularly outstanding to me, was where you sort of, you go through the machine, the section of the production facility that's more robotically assisted, which I think is kind of appropriate given Ulysse Nardin and their sort of high-tech stuff. Yeah. They had a machine there that I won't include the name of it, but I sent it to my buddy that's into machining. He was absolutely fascinated. It's a CNC rotary transfer machine that also does high-precision workplace transfer systems. So it's like a little room. It's like a little robot room with like six or eight whirling arms.
Yeah.
And it can handle up to 66 simultaneous axes and 60 separate tools. So I think
that sounds pretty complicated and expensive.
Yeah, and so there was this guy there, sort of, Minority Report style in front of it. And he's just sort of, observing it and maintaining it and programming it, whatever it is. But there's all this stuff, like all the cutting processes and the parts, sort of machining is happening all on one, in one operation. And I guess that's for economy and for sort of control.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive. It was wild. I'd never seen a machine like that, on a watchmaking, setup. So kind of cool. I don't want to know about the servicing intervals on a machine like that, but that was one side. That was the manufacturer, the GPU manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, really nice. What I found really, really interesting though was I visited the sort of the historic workshop of Ulysse Nardin.
Like the Ulysse, like his workshop?
No. So it's in the town. It's in the town, and it's where they sort of have like I guess it's like a museum. They've got a whole, historic overview of their watches and their important sort of achievements. As you said, it's an old brand, so they've got like, turn of the century pocket watches there, old tourbillons, like old minute repeaters. But where it really started getting interesting for me was the Freak.
Yep, of course.
There's a few interesting things about the Freak. So 2001 first released, and it's famous for having that, the movement as the time-telling mechanism, and also famous for introducing silicon in watchmaking, which is a pretty sort of revolutionary, one of the defining innovations of the 21st century. I think Ulysse Nardin introduced silicon on the balance wheels, and then later on Patek brought it in on balance springs, but still pretty high-tech stuff. Also interesting was that Ludwig Urscheln is the man who's pretty pivotal in a lot of the Ulysse Nardin history. The Freak, however, was born out of an idea that was had originally in the late 90s by Carol Foristia Kasapi, who did a lot of work at TAG Heuer and Cartier with their highly complicated stuff. And so she had this idea of, the movement that moved to tell the time, and then Ludwig, iterated on it and turned it into what it is. But they had the prototype of that, and I'll put some pictures up on IG, like a little highlights, so you can
that'd be cool.
Yeah, so you can see behind the scenes. They had her prototype from the late 90s. They had the original Freak, and then they had like the whole evolution of Freak watches over the last 22, 23 years now. And it's wild. Like, you get used to in watchmaking this sort of hyperbole about, this is, changes the game, does all this stuff, is revolutionary. The Freak is one of those watches, I think, that actually did have a huge significance in the watch industry. Like, when it was introduced, it was before, like,
stood out.
Riche and Mill.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, because you have these experiences with watches, whether it's kind of meeting someone, going to an event, seeing something you've not seen before in person, that sort of really change your perspective on it. And I guess you probably weren't a Freak customer beforehand, but was this one of those experiences where you kind of left and were like, you had this newfound sort of respect and understanding for the watch and for maybe Ulysse Nardin as well?
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh, I actually would. Knowing what I know now after this trip, I would rock one of these. Yeah,
100%. Like, I mean, the money question's another question. Like, I've always respected what the Freak was, but now I understand it better, and I like the depth of knowledge as to what this watch has done, not just for Ulysse Nardin, not just for, the genius of it and of itself, but it is a genuinely significant watch for modern watchmaking. Like, I think you could make an argument that for, watchmaking from the 21st century, this is the most important watch.
Wow.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, yes, like it kickstarted indies. It kickstarted, that whole sort of, new ways of showing time in a really serious way. Anyway, Freaks are great. Another thing, I know you love it, and I sent you some pictures, Andy, the Ulysse Nardin table clock. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's the UFO.
Yeah, how do we get one? How do we get one?
I think it's expensive and has a wait list, but it is super, super cool. You should probably speak to the Hourglass, Andy. But
I mean, we need to figure out a way. There's got to be a way to get.
It's big. It's like, it weighs
because they've dropped like 2 or 3 last year that were just absolutely bonkers, and I think they were like 60,000 Swiss francs.
About that, but they weigh like 7 kilos. Like the base, it's. Again, I'll put a video up. Like, you can whack it. Like, I whacked it pretty hard, and it, sort of knocks over and rotates back up like those, those boxing things you can do. It's so cool. Like, it's just a genuinely interactive and enjoyable object.
Well, if anyone has one that they want to send our way,
Make it happen.
otthepodcast@gmail.com, we can organise logistics.
I'm not done with Ulysse Nardin. The third one, there's another facility I visited that was, for me, super, super nerdy and super, super cool.
Sure.
The Big D. The Big D, it's a building that has a big D on the side. It's called Donzé Cadrans, which is a dial manufacturing facility that's been around since the 70s, I think. Ulysse Nardin acquired it in 2012, just as enamelling. And as someone that has been involved in the production of a dial with a watch with a Grand Feu enamel dial, I got to actually kind of have a part in making one, which was super fun. Got to paint enamel on a dial. Got to watch as they put it in the little kiln, and I didn't realise this. They actually catch fire in there, like
deliberately, or
yeah, like it's part of the process. But it was super cool. Like seeing there's a handful of people working in there. They don't, interestingly, so they do UN and GP dials, of course, but they also do other brands like that. I know, they've said, we can say they make dials or they have made dials for Patek Philippe, Hermes, I think, maybe. But one dial I saw in there that was being worked on was Collective and Zapek have just released a watch with a really stunning blue dial that we saw, some of them being finished, and I didn't know it at the time. And I'm like, hey, like it wasn't, obviously they're not sort of saying who their clients are or what dials they're working on, but it's a pretty distinctive dial.
You also didn't sign anything.
Well, you know how it is. So that was really cool seeing, all the different sorts of, champoulavet, enameling and the different techniques, and finding out some of like the finer details of like the levels they go to. So an enamel dial, it's a metal base. They put this pigment, which is in water, so it's a liquid mixture. They sort of paint that on, and then it gets fired. And that process is repeated to build up colour and depth. But because of how that process is, most people will do it where they drill it or they cut it first, and then they fill around it, which gives you that sort of a look at the edge of the dial or where the hands go in, where there's a little dip.
Okay.
Because you're dealing with the fluid dynamics, which turns into paint or to enamel. What they can do is they will drill and cut the dials after it's been enameled, which is ridiculous. Like the failure rate on that must be so high.
Yeah, I don't like those. I don't like those odds, but I guess it's priced into these lovely timepieces.
That's what you do. That's why it's, and that's the skill
cost of doing business.
Yeah, but that was a super, super cool experience, and legitimately, I think one of the best facilities of its type in Switzerland and probably the world.
Wow, Felix, it's high praise. Very, very cool to hear.
So yeah, that was Ulysse Nardin. I'll put some pictures up on our IG so you can kind of get a bit of a behind the scenes look.
I love it. Well, speaking of business, Felix, today's episode is brought to you by TAG Heuer.
Yes, we have a problem, Andy. We were meant to be talking about the chase for Carrara, but at the time this goes live, we're not allowed to.
This is that elusive promotional movie film starring obviously Ryan Gosling. Nash Edgerton directed it, so a bit of an Australian tie-in, our mate. Amazing imagery. All the assets
have you seen
incredible. The video's incredible. If I had seen it, couldn't tell you. Have you seen it?
All I'll say, Andy, don't mess with props masters.
Enough said. But if you haven't already, make sure you check out TAG Heuer's 2023 releases. There is some exceptional stuff in there. Obviously, it's all around the Carrara. Obviously, that's why they've put in so much effort into this film that we cannot mention. But Felix, you saw it all. Quickly, what was your favourite TAG Heuer release from Watches and Wonders?
Look, I'm going to say the 39mm, the new Carrara with the glass box sapphire. There's two dials. There's the sort of inverse panda, which is the vintage one. I'm going to go with the blue. I think it's the historic ones are really cool, and there's a shot that we should put up as well of the old model and the new model on Nicholas Bybeck's wrist, and they look very similar. But I like the blue. It's a bit more new. It's a bit modern. You get to sort of see like that dial, the dynamic dial is more visible with the blue dial. And it's just, everyone was saying like these guys have really hit their stride this year, and it's all come together beautifully. So, yeah, I think it's a great watch.
Ticks a lot of boxes. Well, tagheuer.com. Make sure you check them out. They support us, so it's the least you can do.
Yeah.
Tony and Mark, is it time to dip into that chat?
Let's get them on. Super short chat between appointments, but, always good to hear what they have to think about watches. I'm here at Watches and Wonders. I've run into Tony and Mark from Hodinkee. We've got like about 3 minutes before we've got to run to 3 separate appointments at different ends of the Palexpo. I'm off to Chanel, Mark's off to Panerai, and Tony's off to Piaget. Mark, let's kick it off with you. You can hold that and speak into it. Unconventional highlight so far.
Oh boy, unconventional highlight. I think the obvious choice is Rolex. Anything from Rolex would.
Unconventional Rolex? What?
Well, I mean that's the thing. I honestly, they could have just done their second ever titanium watch.
Sure.
And had that be massively unconventional. They could have just done a display. Just doing a display case back would have been unconventional on a Daytona.
But they tripled down.
There was that was tame. And that to me is wild.
Which is the most surprising of those releases?
I would say the emoji watch. I don't know what the technical name for it is, but the emoji watch is just who would have thought? And there's been some debate about whether or not it is too cliche and kitschy and will lose its appeal, but there
were those Harley Davidson dials from like the 90s.
Yeah, well, or even Domino's Oyster Perpetuals that were like $3,000 a couple years ago now are $30,000 or more. And I think the point is that once you jump the shark so far,
it's all fair game.
It'll
sharks
always
all the way down.
Sharks all the way down, and it'll always be something wild. And even if it's a moment in time, it's an example of that moment in time.
I love it.
I think it's great.
I would never have imagined unconventional and Rolex in the same sentence. Tony, over to you. Put my watch down. This is your first watch fair. What do you think of it? What has surprised you, and what was not what you expected? It's just another way of saying surprised.
Hey everyone, Hey OT Podcast. If you haven't listened to my episode before, please go back and do that now, and then come back here in 60 minutes, and you can get my thoughts on my first Watches and Wonders. My first thought is that honestly, it's a little bit too busy. Felix and I had set up this time to sit down, grab a coffee, and here we are instead standing in the middle of the Palexpo.
Yeah.
People whooshing past us.
There's lots of beautiful ambient noise, which will be good for your ears.
That's right. Who knows if this audio recording is even going to turn out, Felix? I really hope it does for you.
I trust in the quality of Rhodes Performance microphones.
But listen, it's been great so far. So much of the talk in the watch world is sport watches, obviously, but a lot of dress watches have impressed me so far.
Yeah, okay.
The first thing I wrote up for Hodinkee.com, go find it. Find it on a browser near you.
Plugging.
Is
download the app if you haven't already.
Download the app. You can check the accuracy of your watches right on the app there. There's a separate tab for that. But the first thing I wrote up was the 1908 Perpetual Rolex dress watches.
Definitely not a Cellini.
Which it's not what I thought I would have been writing up the first night of Watches and Wonders when there was a new freaking Daytona. But here I was writing it up, and I really like it. I think it's a great watch. But that's not the only dress watch. I was just at Grand Seiko. They've got a pink-on-pink Shunbun dial.
Is that a US exclusive? Because I didn't see it.
Is it US exclusive? I don't think so.
Okay.
Because
They only had certain dials in certain.
Yeah, I think they mentioned that they were going to be struggling, fighting with other markets to get what they could for the U.S., but it's the pink dial you know and love from the SBGA 413, but in a pink gold case. Man, if it's not giving me like vintage pink on pink Patek vibes, I don't know what is. It's beautiful. The JLC chronograph is awesome too.
Yep.
So many beautiful dress watches from brands across the spectrum that have got me really excited for where that space is at. Oh, shout out to the people at Chopard. I'm really excited to see they released a 36
LUC?
36 millimeter LUC, the classic one from 1996. It's in steel and salmon. It's $23,000 US, which is a lot for a steel dress watch. That's Rolex 1908 perpetual money.
Yep.
But I'm excited to see it. All the people in the Hodinkee comments, all the people with small wrists like me that wanted a small dress watch, we finally got it from a brand like Chopard that's got nothing to lose from doing something like that. So I'm excited to see that one tomorrow. But dress watches, man.
Last question. You can take one watch home, but it can't be a small dress watch. What is it? Don't overthink it. Quick.
Felix, I've got the Anordane OT podcast in my hand, and I might just be walking out the door right now with it.
Yep. If it pops up in the Hodinkee shop, which is an excellent place to buy both new and used watches, shipping worldwide.
This episode brought to you by the Hodinkee shop. Thank you so much for having me on, Felix, and shout out to you, Andy, as well.
Thank you so much for your time. Andy, the thing I like best about Tony Traina and Mark is how consistently excellent Tony was at dropping references to Hodinkee.com and the Hodinkee shop organically.
He's going for promotion or something.
He read the media briefing on how to speak to other media.
He's a company man. He's a real company man.
No, honestly, really, really great to chat to them. One of the best things.
What was it like to meet Tony in person?
It's that weird thing, like you feel like you know him pretty well. It was nice. It was like reading a newsletter in front of you.
He did send his quarterly wrap-up last week. So if you haven't got on that, the newsletter formerly known as Rescapement is now Tony Traina's, I think, quarterly report.
Sure.
Quarterly wrap.
Which I love as a concept, keeping your finger in the newsletter game.
Yeah. So worth checking out if you haven't. Of course, Rescapement is not his handle on Instagram. It's Tony Traina.
We'll link it up. We'll link up. And Mark as well. Really good to meet him. He takes a lot of photos, beautiful photos. But he's also really, really nice person and knows his way around watches. Aside from that, next week we can finally talk about the Carrara video. So, thanks for TAG Heuer for sponsoring us as always. Andy, if people want to get in touch with us, how do they do it?
Like I said, otthepodcast@gmail.com, ot.podcast on Instagram. And if you would like to chat to Felix and I, best place is our Discord, which we link up every week. Hot takes, hotter than what Felix has said on air. It's just a place to be. And of course, 5-star reviews. Make sure you're subscribed and make sure you're sharing the OT podcast love. We will see you everyone next week.
Quick question, Andy. Last question.
Okay.
We need personal YouTube channels.
See you, Felix.
Bye.